If you don't know what to expect as a first-time homebuyer in New York City, you are going to be at a great disadvantage. The New York City real estate market is unlike any other market with very specific rules and very specific criteria, and the buyers who understand that and have a high-level knowledge of all of that certainly are going to have an easier time when buying their New York City dream home. So let's break down some of those things that you need to know as a first-time homebuyer. I'm Dewey Moss. I'm your New York City real estate resource. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button, and let's get started. Buying in New York City is more complicated than most markets. There are specific rules and specific criteria which must be considered when you're buying. So as a first-time home buyer, oftentimes people come to the city and perhaps they've heard what their family did or what other friends did out in other markets, but they're not taking into consideration all these different kinds of criteria that you must meet in order to buy in New York City. So understanding things at a very high level will help you as you begin this process. So the first thing that you need to understand when you're looking at listings and going through Zillow and StreetEasy and all of those fantastic websites is that you may not be able to buy in just any building, and you may not be able to buy just any apartment. That is the number one thing that people do not understand when they're first buying in New York City. The reason for that is because we have several different kinds of buildings. We have condos and we have co-ops. Co-ops make up about 85% of the inventory, so the majority of deals done in New York City are on the co-op side. Condos make up about 15%. Both buildings have a different set of criteria to be able to purchase. Condos are real property, so you can purchase that much more like you would a house. That process is relatively the same. However, if you're going to buy a co-op, which is most often the more economic choice for most first-time home buyers, you have to make sure that you as a buyer meet all the criteria that the board of the co-op sets forth. So let's take an example. Let's say you're a young professional and your parents want to help you buy your first apartment in New York City by giving you the down payment money. There's a term for that in real estate. It's called gifting. And believe it or not every co-op allows parents to gift money to their child in order to buy. The reason for that is because most co-ops want the shareholder coming into the organization to be financially secure and financially independent, and not having that big chunk of money, that equity to put down, says something about the financial independence. But it is entirely up to the board and the individual co-op. You may have two buildings sitting right next to each other. One allows gifting, the one right beside it doesn't. That is just one example of the many rules that you have to consider when you're buying in New York City. So as you're looking at listings, you may say, oh, I love these 10 apartments. I want to go see them. You may go out by yourself to go and see them, only to find out, if you find out in time, that you can't buy in those buildings. So you must understand and be prepared for the different rules so that when you do go and look, you have a strategy and you have an understanding of what you can qualify to buy in New York City. Another thing to consider is that you must be prepared financially. And in order to do that, you must understand what the structure is of buying in New York City. So the buildings, not the banks, set your down payment. So generally for a condo, that's going to be 10% down. For co-ops, it can be 20%, 25, 30%. It really is up to the building and their board as to how much they're going to require that you put down. That is one of your largest expenses in terms of being prepared financially. If you're not prepared with that down payment, there is not going to be an opportunity to buy in New York City because buildings will not change their rules for specific cases. So you must understand what you need financially, and you must be prepared for that before you go looking for an apartment. So again, you know exactly what you can buy in New York City. That is just one of many financial rules that go into buying here in the city. So again, you need to understand that, get with someone who understands that and can walk you through all the details so that you can ensure that you're going to make a good purchase in New York City. Now, I just mentioned getting with someone good that can walk you through all of that. You must have a team when you go and search in New York City. You should not start searching and then try to develop your team, because New York City is very competitive. It often moves very fast. Sometimes there could be multiple offers, and having a team in place and ready to go says to the seller and their agent that you are a serious buyer in New York City and are ready to move on something. So who should be on this team? Well, ideally, first and foremost, you're going to be working with a buyer's agent. A buyer's agent is very different in New York City than other markets. They do a lot of work on behalf of the buyer, including helping them understand all of this criteria that we've been talking about, helping them through board packages and the interview process. It is a long process, so you want to have a really good partner that understands the market from that point, from the criteria standpoint, but then also understands the market in terms of pricing and helping you through all of that, because New York City is a very data-driven market, and if you don't have the correct data, you're not going to be successful in making offers. New York State is an attorney state, which means that you must have an attorney for any real estate deal. The attorneys in New York State are responsible for making the contracts and working on the contracts. So the agents do all the negotiating and helping you up front, but then we hand over that information to the attorneys to form the contract. You need to have your attorney in place really before you go shopping. It's a good idea to have vetted the attorneys and chosen one that really fits you and fits your budget, so that when you're ready to make the offer, your agent can say, by the way, our attorney is X, Y, and Z, and that makes the seller and the seller's agent feel very confident about your offer. So an attorney is required. Good idea to have one before you even go shopping. And this is similar to any other market. You want to make sure that you're pre-approved. You must be pre-approved to make an offer in New York City. No one will listen to an offer that just says we're offering X amount and doesn't provide some financial data behind it. Furthermore, if you're making an offer on a co-op, you not only need the pre-approval letter, but you also need a whole other set of financial information to show them that you meet the criteria that the board has set forth. There's no reason to go through an offer process in a building if you don't meet their criteria. So pre-approval is part of it. You need to have a really good bank or a mortgage broker, preferably, that works in New York City. Do not come to New York City with a bank outside of New York City. It causes quite a bit of problems, and that includes banks just in other states right across the border of New York City. Oftentimes, the deals just don't work because of the various requirements of the banks, and because they don't work with co-ops and condos on a regular basis, they may mess up your deal. So it is best to include someone who's very experienced in the New York City market as your mortgage broker or bank of choice. Another thing to realize is that New York City actually becomes quite small whenever you're apartment shopping. And what do I mean by that? Well, all this criteria that we're talking about really starts defining which buildings you can look at. Where you want to live further defines that. What neighborhood you want. What kind of building you want further defines what buildings you can look at. Do you want a doorman building? Do you need a building with a gym? Do you want to walk up or don't want to look at any walk-up buildings? All of those really start making the inventory that you may be able to look at relatively limited. You may start out with grand ideas thinking, oh, well, New York City is so huge and there's so much inventory. That is true, but 85, 90% of that inventory may get X'd out once we determine what your qualifications are, and then add on top of that the kinds of places that you're looking at. It's not uncommon for people to have maybe 5, 6 apartments to really choose from. So if you think that you're going to have a wealth of inventory to look at, think again, manage your expectations, because once we really consider all that criteria and everything else that you want in an apartment, you actually may be seeing a limited amount of inventory to choose from. And finally, it's helpful to understand that real estate deals in New York City move both very fast and very slow. So what do I mean by that? Well, offers in New York City and the negotiations usually move pretty quickly. It's not uncommon to make an offer within a day, to negotiate within a day, and to have an accepted offer within that day if everything aligns well. So it can move very fast. We then try to move quickly through what we call the due diligence period, where your attorney is reviewing all the information, and then we try to move quickly into contract to take that apartment off the market and make sure that the deal is going to go forward. From the contract on, however, you need to understand that there's going to be quite a length of time there. You will go through your formal mortgage approval process. That usually takes 30 days. If you're buying a co-op, you're going to go through an extensive board application that takes time to put together. It's going to be submitted to the property manager. They're going to review it. The property manager is going to give their feedback. We may have to make a little bit of changes here and there, and then that gets handed over to the board to review. And if the board likes what they see, they then grant you an interview. All of that takes time. And so if you're buying in New York City, you need to allow for the time that it takes to close. So you need to be prepared to move quickly on the front end of the deal, but then give yourself enough time on the back end of the deal and manage your expectations in terms of how long the entire transaction will take. In general, the estimates that we usually give, which can change, but usually on a condo, it takes about 2 months if you're financing to close on a deal. With a co-op, it can be 3 to 4 months, especially if you are financing. If you're paying cash for either kind of transaction, they will move a little bit more quickly, but you need to allow yourself at least 3 to 4 months, especially if you're buying a co-op, to be prepared to close on a deal in New York City. So there you have it. Those are some tips and some things that you need to know as a first-time home buyer so that you can understand what to expect about the New York City market. I hope this was helpful. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. And if you're going to be buying your first home in New York City, look at all the different ways below that you can contact me. I would love to help you find your New York City dream home, and I'll see you next time.